Thank you for joining us in another one of our sessions in our career series where we're getting insights into the careers of professionals and also allowing entrepreneurs to share their story. Today we're joined by Ashanti. Ashanti, would you like to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thank you for having me. So I'm Ashanti, and principally, really, I am an events entrepreneur. So I have various businesses in and around events and technology.
Interesting. So when you say various businesses, because I'm into it, um, do you want to tell us how many and maybe tell us a little bit about each one?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, one, three. So I I run three businesses. The main and the biggest one is Event Mind, which is a digital event company. And so we basically design and create events that I believe are going to change the next generation. And so we do that for brands, but we also have our own in-house self-created events. And then I run two other kind of complementary businesses. One is all about diversity in the events industry. And so we help organizations in events and hospitality improve their diversity and inclusion aims. And then there is a separate business I run, which is still diversity and inclusion, but it's very niche in that we specifically work with public sector, charities, industries that are very underserved, like the nuclear and aviation industry.
Very,
Wow,
very
so, so that's
expected that.
no. Okay, so I guess I kind of have two questions. So one would be, how did you sort of get into events? And
Mm,
the second part of that question would be, for those who might not know, you can give us a little bit of information about like what it is to be like event management and
mm.
processes.
Yeah, no, those are really good questions. So I think I fell into it like most people with the events industry by accident, which is quite ironic because sometimes the events industry they literally will talk about diversity as if you have to train to become a surgeon to get into the industry. You don't. I used to organize events as part of my former and first kind of foundational training was in legal and finance. So I worked for a lot of big banks in their compliance departments. I was a compliance consultant. And so I would organize a lot of events because events really are the main tool that any business, any sector uses to unite people, to generate leads, to build communities, market themselves, etc. So I used to arrange events, some of which were actually diversity events because there was no diversity in most of the places that I worked in. And then I moved from working in finance and started my own business. Now, of course, I was really much younger then and had very little marketing budget, basically nothing. And so the way that I was able to build a name for myself and sell services was by live streaming and creating digital communities. So I had a big Facebook group, I had a podcast show that was really niche back then, and I used live streaming, and that's how I was able to get clients and sell. So it was quite accidental. Now that first business expired, but what happened was is that people kept asking me, well, how did you live stream? This was in the early days before Facebook Live even really came in, and so people would always ask me, how did you build this online community? How did you start the podcast show? How did you sell using online tools? And that's where the business Event Mind today came from, out of like the exploration of the first business. So that's how I evolved to get to this point now.
So I think I have a question around, okay, so what are the different aspects of an event? And I say that because I think sometimes people just go to an event and they think, okay, there's a location and they're speaking.
Mm,
Probably
mm.
all that is,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah, so yeah, that's another good question. So the events industry is actually, so first of all, the events industry is not even recognized as an industry. So if you start a business now, there isn't actually an official code that you can select when you register your company with Companies House for events, which is really interesting. But the industry as a whole is worth 70 billion to the UK. And it is quite fragmented, which I think is also part of the reason why people aren't always sure what it really means to have a career or business in the events industry. You have the trade show industry, trade shows and exhibitions, we can put them over there. Then you've got conferences, You of course have your social events. So one that people commonly know is your weddings, your bridal showers, your funerals, etc. And then you have, what else would come under this? So we do, then you would be part of the venue community. So maybe you own a venue or work for a venue. Then you might be part of operations. So the individuals who do all the health and safety, who basically bring the physical elements of an event together in a room. You have the operations industry. And then aside and throughout all of that, you've got event marketers. You've got, so you've got event marketing. Who else would you have? So it's quite a fragmented industry as a whole, essentially. But the part of the industry that I really work in is the conference and trade show part of the industry. Actually, the other one that I forgot, the other element is internal events. So lots of companies will have their annual general meetings, they'll have like their executive roundtables, sales meetings, town halls, all of that. That is a whole sector almost within itself as well. But I work mostly in trade shows and exhibitions. There's a reason for that. I love B2B. I love selling and buying. And a lot of people don't realize just how much money is in that element of the sector. I really wish more young people would look at getting into trade shows and conferences because it's far more profitable in a different kind of way than, weddings, bridal showers, parties, etc.
I worked in the events industry for 3 to 4 years. I started working for like this consultancy that ran in international trade and investment events, but then I kind of transitioned into the legal sector. So it was a lot of business development events. It's kind of similar to finance a bit, I guess, legal sector.
Yeah.
How did you find working in events in the finance industry?
Yeah. So I mean, this is the thing. It was fine because obviously you have to be quite scrappy and very practical, as you know, in the events industry, because you're trying to get people to come, but you have to make sure that the elements that they need are right there. For me, it was quite easy because there was no diversity in the bank. So you sometimes, as a person of color, especially a Black woman, when you meet the few other Black people in the lift, and you're like, oh, we're doing blah blah blah, and everyone will meet you for that particular meeting. The challenge though was definitely getting the buy-in from senior management and stakeholders, because beyond lip service, they don't really understand why creating spaces that are for your minority employees can be so important in those really corporate settings.
Yes, I have a question around, so going from working in the finance industry to events, but what made you kind of take that plunge and say, I'm going to start a business? Because I think for a lot of people, that's a very, very big decision and sometimes scary as well.
Yeah, so I would definitely say that well, essentially, I always wanted to run a business. This was always my first and preferred option, but I did what was expected of me, and I went to university and went into a very, corporate traditional sector. And for the most part, it's not a bad thing. I learned some really important things in the finance sector about finances that I probably wouldn't have learned anywhere else, to be honest with you. And so there were some hugely beneficial parts of that. Obviously, you get paid well. However, it wasn't really my first choice. I was just very academic and a hard worker, so it was okay, but it wasn't something that I was massively passionate about. For me, creating financial freedom, having a degree of control over who you work with, how much you work, even though that's ironic when you're an entrepreneur. But I wanted financial freedom, and I wanted an unlimited way of making money, quite frankly, and there's nothing wrong with being employed. It's just that I think we're all kind of nurtured into believing that you just have to accept or satisfy maybe the wage that you're being given. So even if you're working in an employed job, you can make money in other ways additionally on top of your wage. And I was always just naturally curious and thought, right, I think I can make a lot more money, so I'm going to start my own business.
I guess the question would be, people always talk about the positives of running their own business and, you know, like positives of entrepreneurship, but we all know that's not true. You know, there's every day has its challenges. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about?
Yeah. Do you know what? Depends on the day or time. I could say that it's highly overrated. No, I think that look, entrepreneurship is glamorized and, you know, sensationalized in terms of, you know, but the fact of the matter is somebody's got to do these jobs. You know, even if you start your own business, you end up employing or working with other people. Not everybody can be a business owner. It just doesn't work. And also, um, it's hard work. You have to be resilient. And I was just having a conversation actually just now, and I feel like if I look back now, and even in these moments in this COVID world, the big thing is discipline. It's not even hard work, it's not effort. It's, are you disciplined enough to do the work, even when you don't want to, or when the signs around you tell you not to? You know, it's the discipline to get up and still develop business, the discipline to continue networking, the discipline to continue to navigate hard conversations, because they do come along often when you're running your own business. How do you negotiate contracts? How do you, you know, have to have a conversation with someone you're working with or an employee who isn't performing? These are hard things to do, but it's the discipline that takes you, I believe, from A to B on this. So I think I think that's why I tend to focus on financial freedom, because you can create that on your own terms, depending on what it means to you, regardless of whether you run a business full time or you also do it as a side hustle. And I think that's the attitude that we probably need to move to. It shouldn't be one or the other. I think it's more about, you know, what financial freedom or control are you looking for, and what's a healthy way for your life to create that.
And I guess, I mean, I want to delve into that just a little bit more. Like, are there any like specific, like challenging situations you've been in and have come out of? Because I think,
especially during the times that we're in right now, like a lot of people are, some people are thriving through this time, and then others are like, yeah, it's not been great. But.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So, okay, I think first of all, in this period of time, it's interesting, right? Because I personally am having to manage my life as an individual and manage my business. And depending on the day, one can seem like it's going very wrong. And actually, from an abstract bystander's point of view, neither is the case. So it just depends on how I'm feeling. And so I think in this time, even when people say they're thriving, take that with a pinch of salt, because what that might mean, and usually does mean, is I can see lots of opportunity if I'm disciplined in this moment. That may not be translating into financial gain, though, for everybody. And social media can be a real, you know, smoke and mirrors as well. So don't rely on social media to inform you as to other people's success, essentially, in this climate. So that's what I would say. But I think the hard times, where should I start? So I had that first business. I spent upwards of £15,000 starting that marketing business, made lots of mistakes, you know, spent money with people that I shouldn't have spent money with, did not focus on building repeatable revenue in the business. And so that was a failure. So that's 15K straight away, now down the drain. Second big business in the last 5 years, coffee shop. Again, I probably spent 3-4 times that starting that business. COVID comes along, have to shut. Right? So it's, yeah, there are some hard times. One thing I think, after being in business for so long now, is money means different things. Losing money means different things. It's just something I can't cry about. It's the risk of the game, basically. And so, yeah, those are some hard times that I've hit, where you have to regroup, you have to refocus, and it is about the discipline to build something from nothing again. It's interesting, actually, in earlier this year, when I had to shut the coffee shop, I had already started ramping up another business, this event mind business that I'd had. And funny enough, when I had the coffee shop, I ended up being in there day and night doing all the work because you can't find staff these days. So that had just totally gone down the drain too. So I was in there running it every day. And at the same time, I was running my events business. So I used the space in the coffee shop to launch some of these events, and I'd run a lot of classes. So obviously we could market the space, etc. And when I had to shut that, I then had to think, what am I going to do next? Am I going to invest all my time in re-ramping up my digital event business? Or am I going to get a job, basically? And the irony was COVID had hit at the same time. So I applied for jobs at the same time as ramping up the business and never got any of those jobs. But one of the jobs that I got, it took them 6 months to even call me back to ask if I still wanted to work there, by which time I'd created a viable business again. So those are hard. Those are the times that people don't really talk about. You know, as an entrepreneur, every now and then you've got to think to yourself, should I get a job, basically? Because ultimately bills have to be paid. I'm not a good example, by the way. I'm not telling everyone to follow my example, but I like to build something from nothing. So that's what I've done again. And I've built 3 businesses that are viable and thriving financially. But that has not been easy. And I know that for lots of other people, they may not be in a position to do that. Yeah.
Since we've kind of gone through the negative, like,
Yeah.
that have come from just running your businesses and, you know.
Oh, the other thing I will say as well is get comfortable talking about money on the positive and the negative side. That's a big thing. I think I realized that I had to work on my relationship with money this year. And I'll be really specific, when you fail or something doesn't go as you planned, or you find you spent money in areas that you didn't get a return on, or you find yourself in debt, our relationship with money becomes really apparent in terms of the way we handle and approach those situations. And I say that in a positive way. So this year, I would definitely say that entrepreneurship has taught me to have a far healthier relationship with money, in that it doesn't indicate or represent who I am as a person, whether you've got lots of it, enough, or none. It doesn't really reflect who I am in terms of my value as a person, in terms of my reputation as a person, or my experience. So that would be a positive. Entrepreneurship, it teaches you to respect money, but you certainly shouldn't place your value in money because it comes and goes. Yeah, that's definitely probably a positive. The other positives are that I get to just do things that I want to do. Basically, I can wake up on a Wednesday and think, do you know what? I think we should do an event on X, Y. And by Friday, that's what we're doing. Like, we put it out there on socials and we found the partners. So there is some great creative flexibility in entrepreneurship. You can move quite in a very agile way, especially against some big competitors right now in the event space. Now that they don't know how to do digital, which we know how to do, we're in a great position to become a strong challenger brand because we know how to use technology. So I'd say the creative freedom, the agility and speed that you can take, not only to launching new concepts, but also making money, because money does love speed. So if the quicker you can get something to market, and the quicker you can adapt to what your audience, what your clients might be saying they need, the quicker you make money. Yeah.
And I guess as an entrepreneur, have you or do you have a mentor now? And and if so, what would be your advice to anyone who's like a mentor, or do you think it's important? Yeah.
So, okay, so mentor can mean different things to different people. So I would say the answer is no. But very recently, so it's handy that we're having this conversation now. I started reading a book called Predictable Revenue, and it was written by a gentleman who was in the founding sales team of Salesforce, which is a sales tool. And he talks about how they took the business from relatively being unknown. So they were doing okay, but they were relatively unknown. And they created this predictable revenue structure within the sales team. And I, obviously coming from a tech background, lots of tech companies use this similar structure for success. And I finally got a chance to read the book, and it just changed my whole perspective of what and how to structure my business. So in terms of mentoring, I'd say there's some brilliant, solid books like that have opened my eyes to how I should be applying my expertise and the visions that I have for the business. Secondly, probably another form of mentoring for me is podcasts. So I listen to a lot of business podcasts. And I'll be even more specific, I listen to a lot of money podcasts. Again, working on my relationship with money and how you actually make money in real life. And then thirdly, recently, as a result of doing that reading, I actually hired what they call a COO, or a revenue operations manager. And his whole job basically is to make sure I'm not spending too much money, that we are seeing the opportunities that we have to make more money. And ironically, even though we're peers, I've hired him into my business. I would say I've experienced a mentoring type experience from him, because he's been in the exhibitions industry 15 years doing that job. And so just from the short amount of time that we've been working together, I have learned like masses. That is going to change the way I do business forever, literally. So I'd say in terms of mentoring, it comes for me from different sources.
I think that's a good point, because I think mentorship in general, people kind of look at it as one way, which is you have this person who's more experienced than you, older than you, who kind of just nurtures you and works with you. But you know what? It can come in many forms. If you can learn constantly from a book or a podcast or etc.
Yes. And do you know what? It's free. You know, well, okay, books don't cost that much. No, honestly, podcasting's free. And I really would implore any young person or anyone of any age, like, open your eyes to the possibilities, because the main reason why I've been able to get where I am today is discipline, but also I will go into places, and I know it's not always easy for everyone, where I am the only one to learn. I don't mind being the brokest person in the room. I don't have a problem with that, because I want to know how people who are doing it. And you have to be willing. Maybe you've not thought about engineering or, I don't know, sales or technology. Listen, read and absorb that content. You know, sign up to a TechCrunch newsletter, sign up to or subscribe to a podcast, because it will. Some of the things that I've learned recently have just blown my mind, because access to these rooms, these places, this type of content, when you've got maybe talent or ideas, suddenly you understand how you can monetize them, because you're in these spaces with people who are doing it.
I guess more COVID related and specific now. So I know you mentioned, you guys are kind of doing well during this time. What kind of effects are you seeing on the events industry, other than obviously not being able to kind of meet in masses at the moment?
Yeah, so the first thing is, the events industry for the most part is made up of individuals who were not inclined towards technology, and now that's been forced upon them. So what we're seeing now is, companies who are willing to be early adopters, willing to test and experiment and fail, are getting data and information that will help them in a post-COVID world. Companies who aren't willing to learn, try anything new, you will be left behind. They don't believe it now, but it's inevitable, essentially. Because if you look at what virtual events looked like in the early days of COVID versus what they look like now at the end of the year, drastically different. That's just 8 months or something like that. Right now, companies have already moved on to kind of creating mini TV broadcasting studios for their virtual events, as opposed to a series of recorded videos. So the pace is the pace you have to keep ahead for us as a company. But if you're in the events industry, you need to keep up with the pace of change, essentially. So yeah, it's a bit of a divider, I believe, at the moment. Those who are willing to explore digital, and then those who are willing to be creative with in-person events that are allowed.
Okay. Cool. So I guess kind of staying on this whole COVID thing, is there anything interesting you've learned about yourself during the time we had, just COVID in general?
Yeah, so as I said, resilience and discipline tested. What are my motivations? That's something I've always had to ask myself on the harder days, on the longer days. Why am I doing this? So I've learned that no, I know that I can create events that change a whole new generation. I've learned that because I'm doing it now. I've learned that I can do a lot with very little resources if necessary, right? I have to work from my home makeshift office with Wi-Fi, with a second-hand laptop and a second-hand phone, which I've done for the last 5 years. You can do a lot with very little.
Okay, just thinking, kind of still on COVID, but not really COVID. So I guess I'm going back to, because we work with young people, that's like the main audience. A lot of them are going through a very challenging time, whether it's they've been in university for a couple of years, they're coming out and they're thinking, where am I going to work, right? They're just about to go into university, or they're in university starting this year, and they're thinking, where are we? Why am I paying 9K? And when what is it going to look like, right? So I know we talked about mentorship, podcasts,
yes,
books. What kind of like advice do you have for people who are thinking about how to kind of during this time?
No, this is a good question, and in fact, I think without sounding or seeking to be insensitive, ultimately you should never put your life in the hands of somebody else or institutions, etc. And I think this year has really demonstrated that. You can't rely on them to give you the right grade. You can't rely on them to find a way around educating you during a time like this. This is why it's really important to lean into. So, first of all, identify what your strengths, your talents, and your interests are. And your mindset, in my view, and I say this to my younger siblings and other younger people in my environment, is think about monetizing that. We have to change the way we think about careers and success. And for a lot of cultures as well, this will challenge maybe what older generations believed and what got them to where they are now. I'm not discounting that, because without them doing what they did, like assimilating, etc., we may not have the freedoms that we have, the relative freedom that we have right now. But it's a new generation now. The digital world is changing things massively. So the first thought, I believe, and strategy should be, how can I monetize my strengths, talents, and skills, as opposed to how do I break into an industry or a career track. If you think about monetization first, the options are endless for you right now, regardless of whether you get onto that university course, regardless of whether or not, your halls are open. Think about this, social media influencers. Who sets the rules for them? No one. You've got somebody who starts an Instagram account, starts a YouTube channel, and starts talking about, I don't know, living in a caravan. There's people who people watch their videos unboxing Lego.
Yeah.
Like anything is an interest. Anything. People watch gamers all day.
Yeah.
So that is a hobby. Well, what was perceived to be a hobby. It's just an interest, a talent, a strength, and now it's being monetized. Do you think that a gamer who's earning 100,000 a year cares about whether or not he would be accepted onto a graduate scheme? No, it's irrelevant completely, because he is able to monetize something he enjoys doing so that he can make a living and have the life that he wants. So for me personally, one of the things I'm always encouraging young people to do is to think about their strengths and their talents and skills and how they can monetize those, because then all of a sudden it doesn't really matter, essentially, these traditional career paths and whether or not you'll be able to access one.
Yeah.
It's true though, it's true.
Yeah, laughing about the gamers. But you know how gaming was, like I guess it was like a hobby for some, and now it's monetized. Do you have any hobbies?
That's a good question. No. No, I don't have any hobbies, is the truth of the matter. But this is, I guess, I think, a part of personal development for me, like I was saying, seeking to find some balance at some point, probably more so in the new year. That's why I'm making the changes to my business, so that we create a more streamlined, repeatable revenue structure, which doesn't require me to be so hands-on. And that will allow me to do some of the things that I enjoy, like read or travel, etc., when we're allowed to travel. But yes.
I guess traveling is a hobby then.
Yeah.
Okay, so cool. So 2 final questions, and these are kind of like questions we ask everybody who on this series. So one of them is, if you could speak to your 18-year-old self, what would you?
You don't want to.
I mean, what advice would you give her?
Can't remember what my 18-year-old self was thinking. Do you know what I would say to her? Do what you want to do now. Yeah, do it now. There was, yeah, just do it now, because I would have preferred to have wasted thousands of pounds at 18 than in my 20s, quite frankly. Before I had a credit file I cared about, um, so before credit file was, adulting started, it would have been better to waste 30 grand at 18. But having said that, all of these experiences I hear, they aggregate into wisdom at some point in life. So, and also I think I would have said to her that it's never too late as well, because, now I was reading an article the other day about people who become millionaires, for example, in their late 40s. I mean, most people's success comes later in life. So I think, I would have said to her, do what you want to do now, but it's also, you've got some life to live yet.
I guess the last question is, it's Friday, at work. What's for lunch and what's on your Spotify playlist?
Oh, okay. So, okay, lunch. What do I really enjoy? Well, if I'm having something that I really enjoy on a Friday, is plantain.
Yes.
Yeah, always got to. Yeah, and then in terms of Spotify, on a Friday, what would be on my Spotify? Very honestly, it's usually one or two things. It's usually something like lovers rock or reggae, or it is grime. Probably it's one of the two, which doesn't make any sense at all, but it's usually one of those two. I love, the other thing is that it's not even just the music for me that I love about the grime industry. Again, it's very entrepreneurial. We've all watched and been a part of it in terms of our generation. That is an industry is built on pure grit, essentially, and creativity. So yeah.
Well, we really appreciate you taking out some time to come and
Yeah, sure.
And I guess if anybody is thinking about getting into the events industry, or is a young person who's looking for something, how can they get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, first of all, come and find me on LinkedIn. That's where I hang out. I believe everyone should be on LinkedIn, by the way. So again, if you're a young person, learn as much as you can about LinkedIn, start building a personal brand on LinkedIn. Come and find me on there. I co-run a network called Black in Events. So if you would like to get into the events industry, there's always projects happening where we could put you on and get you some work experience.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.
So much for your time.
No problem.